Could we see a blockbuster trade with Jack Eichel heading to the Vegas Golden Knights? Today we're going to discuss an article suggesting that Vegas should definitely make that move. We also have reports that the Senators and Brady Tkachuk are apparently closing in on a long-term contract. We have a few hires around the NHL and some more PTOs and other news as well. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to talk about here today. We have several smaller tidbits of news, as well as news on Brady Tkachuk and a Jack Eichel article I want to reference and take a look at here as well. Now, first up is some of the news tidbits. We have news out of Boston that they've restructured a little bit of their management here. They apparently were moving John Ferguson Jr. out of his assistant GM role into an executive director of player personnel role, and he hasn't decided to not go ahead with that, and he's leaving the organization. They've promoted Evan Gould to be the new AGM who looks after the Providence Bruins, which is what Ferguson used to do, and so he'll be taking over that role. Ferguson, instead of taking the new role that was offered, leaves, and he's been hired by the Arizona Coyotes, and he becomes their assistant general manager to GM Bill Armstrong, and will oversee their American Hockey League franchise instead. So essentially the same role with the Coyotes that he's done with the Bruins for the last number of years. I believe he's worked there, I think it's 5 years altogether. He's been with the Bruins organization. Of course, he was a GM once upon a time back with the Toronto Maple Leafs, a whole different era of hockey. I know he wasn't exactly revered for the job he did there, and of course his dad was involved in the game of hockey, of course as a player and manager for a long time there as well. We also have some other management type news. Sportsnet personality Mike Futa is going back to being an executive in the NHL. Of course, he worked with the LA Kings for a long time previously and has worked a bit with Sportsnet over the last couple of years. Futa has now been hired by the Carolina Hurricanes to be a senior consultant to general manager Don Waddell. So obviously Futa worked a lot, especially on the prospect side of things and with the amateur side of the game. So we'll see what he brings to the Hurricanes organization, but certainly somebody who's very well respected, has a lot of experience. I know as an assistant general manager in LA, there was quite a stretch of time there where he was heavily considered one of the up-and-coming next GMs in the league, but never quite got there, and eventually left the Kings post and, like I said, ended up on the media side for a little while, and now he's back in Carolina. So we'll see how things go from there. We also got word as well that the NHL is going to be adjusting its hockey calendar a little bit going into next offseason, largely due to the fact that we have an extended break now that we know for sure that the players are able to participate at the 2022 Olympic Games in China. So because of that, the draft that was normally scheduled for June 24th, 25th appears to be getting bumped to about July the 7th. Looks like the date that the NHL is targeting. And then, of course, free agency always comes after the draft. We thought maybe free agency would go back to being July 1 like it used to be. Doesn't look like that's going to be the case either. So if the draft will be July 7th, at least the opening night for round 1, that means rounds 2 to 7 would be on July the 8th, which would be a Thursday, Friday is what they're looking like. I would assume that either Sunday or the Monday after that would be when free agency would kick in. So we'll have to see how things go. Nothing has been officially announced here from the NHL, but I know Corey Pronman of The Athletic was reporting on the date of the draft being adjusted, and we'll kind of go from there once things are officially announced by the league. Now we also have a few PTOs to announce here today as well. The Edmonton Oilers have announced that Colton Seaver will be joining them in training camp on a professional tryout. Seaver most recently played for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Of course, he played with the Panthers before that as well. Clearly, the Oilers are a team looking to have some depth at the center position. Seaver can do that. Of course, they already signed Derek Ryan as well. They still have Kyle Turris under contract, so certainly going to create a lot of internal competition for those number 3 and 4 center spots. And of course, they do have youngster Ryan McLeod, who should be in the mix too for possibly grabbing one of those jobs. So it kind of creates some insurance depending on how they feel about their young guys, and whether or not everybody's kind of ready or who they want to go with. And of course, with the Oilers as well, part of this is they also announced today that Dylan Holloway is going to be out for about 3 months. Now, he was their former first-round pick that might have been able to make the jump this year, to be completely honest, but he needs to have wrist surgery. Again, of course, he had a wrist injury last year, had surgery. Specialists have determined that he needs further surgery to complete the correction and make everything better. And he's going to be out for about 3 months, completely missed training camp. So he won't really be playing hockey on a regular basis again here, and probably until like at least late November, maybe early December or so. So it kind of depends on where things go. I mean, he could be an option later into the year, but I thought Holloway and McLeod could battle for spots in those bottom 6 center roles, but obviously Holloway is on the shelf for a period of time. We also got word that the Anaheim Ducks have invited Toby Reeder to training camp on a professional tryout as well. Of course, Toby Reeder's bounced around with numerous teams in the last number of years, and he will see if he can continue his NHL career and earn a contract with Anaheim if everything goes well in that front. Another note here as well, of course, we talked about the situation involving the U.S. Olympic team and GM Stan Bowman, where there was a request made by an advocate group asking for him to be suspended from being the GM of Team USA for the Olympics. The U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, who would look after that, has rejected the request. So they are not intending to do anything about the allegations facing the Hawks GM, and intend to fully let him fulfill his duties as the general manager of Team USA for the 2022 Olympic Games going over in China. So it's certainly, some obviously have concerns. Obviously, all of the allegations against the Hawks and their management group and everything that was, reportedly overlooked and not dealt with is pretty serious allegations. And obviously, I know there's many that would like to see, Bowman at least doesn't mean he was guilty of everything, right? But I mean, at the same time, usually if you're under investigation, you don't get other big opportunities and promotional opportunities and those types of things. But either way, it doesn't look like they intend to do anything about it, and he will fulfill his duties as general manager. At least right now, that's where everything stands on that front. Now, before we jump into the rest of today's video, I do want to pause for a moment and acknowledge our channel sponsor, Manscaped. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscaped. Of course, with Manscaped, we have a special offer here for all Top Shelf Hockey viewers where you can get 20% off and free shipping on all orders at manscaped.com. Now, of course, Manscaped just launched a brand new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is a fantastic product. They've taken the level up here, even again with the skin-safe replaceable blades. It's waterproof, it's wireless charging, has a travel lock on it, as well as a nice light so you don't miss what you're doing. So certainly a terrific product. Now, many people associate Manscaped with their trimmers, which is certainly kind of their top product, but they do have a lot of other great options as well, including what they call the Weed Whacker, which is another trimmer for your ears and nose. And they have a variety of deodorants and sprays as well, which also keep you fresh and are terrific as well. So certainly Manscaped has a lot to offer, and we certainly highly recommend all of their products. So check out manscaped.com and use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. So thanks very much for watching that promotional content. I do greatly appreciate it. Now, of course, we've talked a bit about Ottawa Senators forward Brady Tkachuk and contract negotiations here off and on over the past week or so. He's certainly one of the bigger names still out there that remains unsigned. Gord Miller of TSN put out earlier today that he's hearing, according to his sources, that the Senators and the Tkachuk camp appear to be closing in on a long-term deal. Now, I know Brady Tkachuk's birthday is later this week. Maybe he'll get it as a birthday present and announce everything on that day. I know Sens fans would probably be quite delighted if that's the case. There were reports from Bruce Garriock of the Ottawa Sun and a few other reporters that cover the Senators. Even Elliot Friedman said he would have to believe, even though he doesn't have confirmation, that they would have at least offered an 8x8 deal like they have for top defenseman Thomas Chabot. Personally, I think it's going to take more than 8 to get the deal done for Tkachuk. So we'll see what they end up agreeing on. But it would be really, really good for the team and for the organization and for the fan base to get one of its top players locked up long term. I know a lot of people want to see him made captain. And after all the instability that this team and franchise has faced over the last especially probably 4 years, really ever since the 2017 run to the Eastern Conference Final, being 1 goal away from the Stanley Cup Finals against the Nashville Predators. Things have been really unstable. A lot of top stars have left town, and now it's guys like Tkachuk and Chabot and all these new guys, Batherson, that are signing hopefully longer term, and they're going to be the next core group of players that this team needs to build around and pay appropriately to help see if they can get them to be more competitive, more respectable, and take them out of this rebuild. Pierre Dorian's gone on record to say he feels the rebuild is over. Well, it ain't over if you lose Brady Tkachuk. So to me, this needs to get done. It's certainly imperative, as well as all of the other top RFAs around the league. They're very important to their teams as well. And maybe a Tkachuk signing, if we get that here in the next little bit, then it should hopefully spawn some others to get done here as well. I know it seemed to be important for him to make it to Ottawa in time for training camp. It'd be nice to see them go through a proper camp with him. And like I said, they need to name a captain. They need to move this team forward. And if things got messy and nasty on that negotiation, it could really it's not going to take a lot for this fan base to lose faith again, even though there's a lot that are still rebuilding that faith in the franchise. But for those that are still optimistic and trying to be hopeful about the future, something like that would just set things that much further back. I know they're going to possibly struggle with ticket sales and all that, so they need to do the right thing and get him under contract here so that he can be the guy they build around and help sell some tickets in that building. Now, the other big thing I want to talk about here today was an article referencing Jack Eichel and the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, Vegas Hockey Now writer Steve Karp goes on to write an article here, and I'll link the article in the pinned comment if you want to read through it. Essentially, he's writing from the Vegas perspective here, that talking about they should absolutely be making a run for this player. They've been linked to him in the past here, but of course we know that the Jack Eichel saga is probably far from over. At this point, he still needs his surgery. He hasn't had it, and there seems to be a lot of things that need to get resolved here for the Sabres to pull the trigger on a deal. But he goes over what he feels would be required. He mentions the fact that it couldn't even require a third team involved to kind of act as a broker, which very well could be the scenario. I know we've seen different NHL reporters out there when it comes to Eichel or even Tarasenko talking about the fact that that type of trade with a third team involved very well could likely be required, and there are a few teams out there that are willing to basically sell or rent you some cap space in order for something of interest coming back to them. Now, in the case of Tarasenko, a little easier because it's only 2 years left, whereas Eichel has a much longer term, so they'd be tying up cap space for many more years. So that gets a lot more complicated. It's probably going to be a higher price for a third team to get involved. But essentially, the article goes on to reference that they could likely give up 2 roster players to try to offset the money. Obviously, the roster players likely would be Riley Smith and defenseman Nicholas Hagg. That's what I've talked about before as well. Riley Smith's in the final year of his contract and certainly would be of interest to a variety of players. And he certainly would be of interest, I think, to a variety of teams out there. That may not obviously be enough money to offset $10 million of Jack Eichel coming through. So there still could possibly be another move in there that the Golden Knights need to do. Because even if they were able to find a team to retain a bit on Eichel, it's still going to be a situation where they might need more than that. Smith and Hagg going out. I mean, how much is somebody going to retain for all those years left, right? That's going to be complicated and costly. And even though it would make things easier and could be an option, I really have my doubts and concerns that it's something that's going to be very easy to put together. So to me, it's likely going to have to be a scenario where they have enough money come off their own cap in an Eichel trade to make it work. Of course, you're also looking at likely having top prospect Peyton Krebs be included and a first-round pick, maybe even one more asset. He actually mentioned first-round picks. So Smith, Hagg, he said first-round picks and Peyton Krebs. So, from his perspective, even if they had to give up, say, 2 first-rounders, something that he appears that Bill Foley, Kelly McCrimmon, and George McPhee need to do to take this team forward. This team has been incredibly successful in Vegas its entire time it's been in a National Hockey League franchise, but they have not hit the ultimate goal of winning the Stanley Cup. It's very evident that the top center position on this team is not nearly strong enough, and that is where their weakness lies. And they haven't really, in my opinion, totally addressed it this offseason. They did make some trades. They did pick up Nolan Patrick. But to me, they still don't really have a bona fide, legit top number 1 center iceman. And Jack Eichel could certainly be that guy. So it makes a ton of sense that he would fit what they need and get them over the top to be more of a cup threat. But it is a lot of an asking price. But we do know this, and I've said this before when talking about Vegas and Jack Eichel, is that I think Vegas has stood one of the best chances to get the deal done, because so far, every time they've set their minds to wanting to bring in a big-name player to address a need on the team, they've gotten it done because their owner is extremely aggressive. He's not afraid to spend right to the cap, and he's not afraid to mortgage the future to get that Stanley Cup in Vegas as soon as possible. So we've seen them be successful when it comes to Mark Stone. We've seen them be successful in other areas as well, like Max Pacioretty. They almost had Erik Karlsson as well from Ottawa in a separate deal before the Stone trade. They've been very, very aggressive, and we know that they're at this point, they're not too concerned about what they're going to be like 5 or 7 years down the road. They want to win, and they want to win now. And they are a really, really strong team that is probably only missing like that one more piece to really help get them there. And it's definitely that bona fide, legit number one center. There's no doubt it makes a ton of sense from that perspective. But it is a lot of an asking price and difficult to pull off from a salary cap perspective. Throw in the whole surgery here that he needs to have, and it gets complicated. It gets risky. But you know what? Vegas, they understand risk. They're from a gambling town. They know this better than anybody. And to me, like I said, they've been one of the top destinations, probably along with a team like Minnesota and the New York Rangers. To me, have always made the most sense and have some of the best packages to make this happen. I also thought the LA Kings from their early going made a ton of sense too, but of course that doesn't make sense now given what the other moves they've made and how that team has changed. So you take them out of the mix, and just from a pure roster perspective, who needs Eichel the most? What kind of prospects and picks and players can they offer up in a package? To me, those are the teams that make the most sense, and I can't help but wonder, depending on how negotiations and contracts go with Kaprizov in Minnesota, will they ever get to the point that they say, okay, we can't take this anymore, we're going to trade him for a guy like an Eichel, for example? I mean, I'm not really sure you're making your team better, because Kaprizov is certainly a very dynamic player that's, obviously electrified that town and that team and really took them up a major notch in the standings last year. His effect on them was huge. You take him out, you bring in Eichel, you get a different kind of effect. I don't really know that you're better, but it's different. And just with Kaprizov, I know we're kind of going off on a tangent here because we're talking about Eichel, but I just really wonder if he really wants to be there, right? So will they ever get to that point, and could Minnesota get back in the mix in an Eichel trade by bringing in this other RFA that we've talked about as, a problematic contract negotiation too? You can't help but wonder. But this article talks about Vegas, and it's a lot. But to me, I want to know what you guys think. Does Vegas go all in and offer up Riley Smith, Nicholas Hague, Peyton Krebs, and at least one first-round pick with possibly another pick or something else in there as a fifth asset? Do they make this deal? Does it really legit make them the leading contenders for the Stanley Cup? What are your thoughts down below? Let me know. Let's discuss and see what everybody thinks. And of course, the article, as I said, will be pinned in a pinned comment if you want to read the full story. So let me know what your thoughts are down below. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We will keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next time.